I don't know why I even signed up for the camping trip in the first place. I hated bugs, the cold, and the fact that there would be no Wi-Fi. But being a junior in college meant I should broaden my horizons or whatever. Plus, my best friend Lindsay was all about this stuff. Hiking, camping, adventure. She was practically bouncing when we heard about the weekend trip, organised by our environmental studies professor, Dr. Matthews. So against my better judgment, I let her talk me into it. It was supposed to be a simple 2-day retreat into the nearby national forest. The weather forecast was perfect. I imagined myself sitting around a cosy campfire, roasting marshmallows and laughing with my classmates. Simple, fun, harmless. At least that's what I thought. The day started out perfectly. The air was crisp, and the sun pierced through the canopy of the trees like beams of gold. We had hiked for hours, and I couldn't believe how peaceful everything felt, despite my aching legs. The forest seemed so alive, filled with the sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling underfoot. Even I had to admit, it was beautiful. By late afternoon, we reached the campsite. It was a small clearing by a gentle stream, and everyone immediately got to work, setting up tents and gathering firewood. I took a few pictures on my phone and tried not to think about how quickly the sun was descending behind the hills. That's when things started to go wrong. I still don't know how it happened. One minute, I was gathering kindling near the edge of the camp, listening to the faint murmur of conversation behind me. The next minute, I was stepping further into the trees, chasing after something. I don't know what I thought I saw. Maybe it was the movement of a deer or the flicker of a shadow. But my curiosity got the better of me. Before I knew it, the camp was out of sight, and the trees had closed in around me. I wasn't worried at first. I figured I could just retrace my steps back. But after wandering in circles for what felt like an eternity, I realised that the path I had taken was no longer clear. The woods around me had grown darker, the once golden light now muted and grey. Panic began to stir in my chest, but I tried to keep calm. It couldn't be that hard to find my way back, right? I just needed to think. But as the minutes ticked by and the forest grew eerily quiet, my confidence began to crack. Every tree looked the same, and the air had a damp chill to it. The soft hum of insects that had filled the air earlier was gone, replaced by a profound silence. It was as though the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. I tried to call out, shouting Lindsay's name, but the sound barely carried. It was swallowed by the trees, absorbed into the dense undergrowth, like it had never existed at all. I walked for what felt like hours, hoping to hear the crackle of the campfire or the sound of voices. But there was nothing. My phone had no service, and the battery was draining faster than it should have been. Of course, I hadn't packed a flashlight or a map. Why would I need those when I had Lindsay and the rest of the group to rely on? The sun was setting now, casting long shadows that made the woods look even more sinister. The sky above me bled from gold to crimson to a deep, inky blue, and with the dark came the cold. A sharp snap echoed through the trees and I froze. My eyes darted around, searching for the source of the sound. It was probably just a branch falling, I told myself, but the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I wasn't alone out here. I started walking faster, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The woods felt different now. Hostile. The trees were taller, more twisted, and their branches seemed to reach down like claws. The air smelled damp and earthy, and there was a faint mist curling around the base of the trees. Then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic rustling, like something was moving through the underbrush behind me. My heart raced. I turned around, expecting to see an animal, maybe a deer or a raccoon, but there was nothing, just the trees, their dark silhouettes looming over me, and the suffocating quiet. I quickened my pace, nearly tripping over exposed roots as I scrambled through the undergrowth. My thoughts were jumbled, panic clouding my judgment. I had to find the campsite. I had to find someone, anyone. As the night grew darker, my mind started to play tricks on me. Every shadow seemed to move. Every crack and rustle sent a fresh wave of terror through my body. The rustling behind me continued, sometimes closer, sometimes further away, as if something, or someone, was following me. I tried to reason with myself. It was just my imagination. There was no one out here except me. But deep down, I knew I wasn't alone. The forest opened up slightly, revealing a narrow trail, barely visible in the dim moonlight. I took it, hoping it would lead me back to the campsite, or at least to safety. But the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. I could feel eyes on me, hidden just beyond the reach of the light. The rustling grew louder, and this time it was accompanied by something else. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper, carried on the wind. I didn't want to turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs were heavy, my feet dragging through the dirt. My breaths came in shallow gasps, and I could barely think straight. I had to keep moving. That's when I saw the light, faint and flickering just ahead. It looked like a fire, a campfire. Relief surged through me. I wasn't alone. I ran toward it, my legs burning, desperate to reach the safety of other people. But as I drew closer, the light flickered out. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. The campfire, or whatever it had been, was gone. There was no sign of anyone, no tents, no laughter, nothing. Just darkness and the oppressive silence of the woods. I could hear my own heartbeat now, thudding loudly in my ears. My mouth was dry and my throat ached from shouting for help. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought them back. Crying wouldn't help me. I had to keep moving, even though every step felt like a descent into madness. Suddenly, the whispering returned, louder this time. It wasn't the wind, it was voices. Low, guttural voices, speaking a language I didn't understand. I spun around, desperate to see who, or what, was there. But the shadows swallowed everything. Then I saw them. Eyes. Glowing yellow eyes peering at me from between the trees. Not one pair, but several. Watching me. Following me. I ran. I don't know how long I ran for. Minutes? Hours? The forest blurred around me as I crashed through the undergrowth, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. The eyes were still there, always just behind me, always watching. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in protest, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't. Eventually, I stumbled into a small clearing, gasping for breath. The ground was uneven, and I collapsed onto my hands and knees, shaking. The eyes had disappeared, and the forest was silent again. But the fear still clawed at my insides. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling beneath me. I needed to keep moving. I needed to... The ground shifted beneath me and I fell. It wasn't a clearing, it was a pit. A deep, narrow pit, covered with leaves and branches. I hit the bottom hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. Pain shot through my ankle and I cried out, clutching it as tears streamed down my face. I was trapped. I tried to pull myself up, but the walls of the pit were too steep, too slick. I clawed at the dirt, desperate to find a grip, but it was no use. My ankle throbbed and my whole body ached from the fall. The forest loomed above me, the trees bending over the pit like dark sentinels. And then I heard it again. The whispering. Closer this time. The rustling of leaves. Footsteps. Someone or something was coming. Or I screamed for help, my voice hoarse and raw. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I could hear the snapping of twigs, the rustling of leaves, the low murmur of voices I still couldn't understand. My heart pounded in my chest, and I pressed myself against the dirt wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. The footsteps stopped just outside the pit. I held my breath. barely daring to move. Then a hand reached down into the darkness. It wasn't the glowing eyes. It wasn't the monsters I had imagined in my fear. It was Dr. Matthews. "Jenna?" His voice was firm, but there was relief in it. "Thank God we found you!" I stared at him in disbelief, my mind struggling to process what was happening. Behind him, I saw Lindsay and a few of my other classmates, all holding flashlights and wearing worried expressions. They helped me out of the pit, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Dr. Matthews wrapped an arm around my shoulders to steady me, and I leaned on him, my ankle throbbing with every step. "We've been searching for hours," Lindsay said, her voice shaky but filled with relief. "You just vanished." I got lost," I stammered, still disoriented, glancing around at the trees, half expecting to see those glowing eyes watching us from the darkness. I tried to find my way back, but something was out there. Dr. Matthews looked at me sharply. "Something?" I swallowed hard, the fear still clinging to my skin. "I don't know. I kept hearing whispers, and there were these eyes, glowing in the dark. They were following me." Lindsay and the others exchanged uneasy glances, but Dr. Matthews just nodded, his expression unreadable. "Let's get you back to camp," he said gently, guiding me forward. "We'll talk about it later." Back at the campsite, the warm glow of the fire was like a lifeline, chasing away the cold that had seeped into my bones. My classmates gathered around, concerned but trying to act casual, as if this was just another camping trip story. I could still feel the weight of the forest pressing down on me, though, the memory of those eyes burning in my mind. Dr. Matthews helped me sit by the fire, his face lit by the flickering flames. "Jenna," he said softly, crouching down beside me, "what you experienced out there. Sometimes the forest plays tricks on people when they're lost. The mind starts to see and hear things that aren't really there." I nodded, but deep down I wasn't convinced. I knew what I had seen. The eyes, the whispers. It wasn't just my imagination. Lindsay sat next to me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "You're safe now," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "You're safe." But as I stared into the crackling fire, the shadows dancing in the flickering light, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest wasn't finished with me yet. Somewhere, out there in the darkness, those eyes were still watching, and they were waiting.